One more day of this stupid mess. I finally found one like yours that goes out, and it's so stupid. I'd like to open the meeting, special meeting of the City of Sonoma Joint Climate Action. At this point, I'd like to have a Pledge of Allegiance, and I will do it for everybody. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Agramonte.
Oh, here.
Yes. Councilmember Felder.
Here.
Commission Member Albach.
Here.
And Commissioner Morel will not be attending tonight because of a conflict.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Councilmember Felder.
Yes.
And Commissioner Albach.
Aye.
It passes 3-0, unanimous.
Thank you. Number one, comments from the public. On with the. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the Joint Climate Action Subcommittee, JCAS, at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for JCAS consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the chair, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating and spelling your name.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Tom Conlon would like to speak.
Oh, great.
Go ahead and speak, Tom.
And we've got to put this
on. Audio only. Oh, on cloud media. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. I wanted to first begin by just welcoming Councilmember Felder to this body. I think he'll be a strong addition to the work that we have here, and looking forward to hearing from him. I also was reviewing the April 14th minutes and realized that we've now passed a year since the climate emergency resolution, or nearly past a year, since the climate emergency resolution was approved, and that we've only met once, this body's only met once, and that from April to October is really far too long for a body intended to address an emergency to meet. It almost gives the impression that the city of Sonoma is in denial about the fact that climate change is an existential threat to the city of Sonoma. So I hope that, I understand that there's been extenuating circumstances, but I do hope that we'll see this body become more active in the weeks and months ahead. I wanted to give a brief update on the track gas, save gas matter that I described in the last meeting briefly. I've been in touch with the California Energy Commission staff, which collects data on gas station sales from all over the state, and with BC CAPS at the Regional Climate Protection Authority, who's very interested in tracking this data as well. BC pointed out that it appears that some jurisdictions in Sonoma are not having any sales tracked for those jurisdictions, so we'll be investigating that. The new sales data for the year is out, has been published. I haven't reviewed it yet. And I have requested a list of the stations reporting throughout Sonoma County, as well as that data. My request has been referred to the California Energy Commission's legal office. And I just wanted to note that next week, next Monday, will be Indigenous Peoples Day, and that there is a SCTA board meeting that day. And it's an important meeting for us to participate in. I know that our representative has not been able to attend the last couple of times, and there's some important matters appearing before that board this next month. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to this matter tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Conlon.
Comments.
Thank you. Then I would like, where am I? I lost my agenda. Okay. Yep. That was it. Okay, so, alrighty. So I've closed the public comment. I'm going on to the consent calendar. 2.1, approved draft minutes from the April 14, 2021 JCAS regular meeting. I can't, my screen died. So I think we'll go to that, to the minutes. I did not, oh, my stupid thing's broken. I don't have the minutes. I don't know what the hell's wrong with this. Oops, wrong.
No, you could take you could do this. You could either continue it to the next meeting for approval, or you, even if you weren't there, you could also approve the minutes.
I'd like to pull that item just to ask one question.
Actually, you don't even need to pull it to ask one question.
I just want, in the minutes, it said that that we had directed Travis or our staff to see if other commissions would weigh in on assessing climate action. I was just curious if that happened.
Could you repeat that?
The minutes indicated that we directed that other commissions would be sought to see if they would weigh in on assessing climate actions, and I wondered if that ever happened.
Not to my knowledge, no.
That's it.
Do you accept the minutes?
Yes. I move that.
So on the consent calendar, although there's no one here, you do have to ask if there are any comments on the consent calendar from public.
No, we don't.
A motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the draft minutes from April 14th, 2021 JCAS regular meeting.
And I'll second it.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Agramonte? Do you?
Aye.
Okay. City Council Member Felder
Yes.
and Commissioner Alabak.
Aye.
Okay, passes 3-0. Approval of the minutes.
We're moving on to the regular calendar. 3.1, discuss and consider update of progress on the city's sustainability and climate action change work plan status record.
So I'm going to give just a very brief introduction. Based on the preparation and presentation of the report titled Sonoma's Climate Action and Environmental Sustainability Accomplishments and 2020-2021 Work Plan back in April 2020, the city council approved the work plan that was included in that document, which is reflected in the agenda attachment. The purpose of this work plan was to provide direction to the city's sustainability coordinator until December 2021, which was the length of period. Attached in your agenda packet is a table that presents highlights of the various accomplishments under each of these items in color-coded and numerical in numbers based on the items presented. That concludes staff's presentation on the work plan, and staff would be glad to answer any questions on that.
All right. I do have a question. I think a while back you and I talked about the EV charging stations at the community center. Have they ever been turned on? I don't see any cars there. Is anything happening there, Travis?
Yes, it's anticipated probably in the next few weeks. It was based on PG&E energizing the power to that. There were a couple issues, but that should be within the next couple weeks is the expected date
Okay.
or expected time frame that they will be energized.
Do you have a question, Bob?
Just on the other two EV stations that are off of Napa Street that apparently are not working anymore.
That's correct.
Is it a technical problem, or is it just a loss of contract, or what?
Well, actually, so they're about 11 years old, and we did try to repair them last year. There's just no parts because those are like 3 models old. And so staff right now is looking at replacing them and considering a leasing option, actively doing that right now.
Thank you.
Fred, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have more comments. Can I make comments?
Sure.
Let's see. I just start here. The agenda item says discuss and consider update of process on city sustainability and climate action plan, and later it says environmental sustainability plan. So I want to backtrack to that, to some of the suggestions that I made in my sustainable tourism webpage and sustainability climate page, that those include a more robust definition of sustainability to include triple bottom line and full cost accounting framing. That if you've seen the Venn diagram of sustainability of environment, society, and economy, and so it seems that the city's web pages on sustainable tourism and sustainability and climate are pretty much restricted to the environmental pillar of sustainability. And so I included in my little essay on sustainability, I linked to the UCLA webpage where it had a little video, and so I think that it would be good if the city would weigh in on that and take a more of a triple bottom line, full cost accounting stance and framing on its web pages there. And so that kind of just encapsulates, what I wrote in those 2 essays there. And so that's generally considered to be what sustainability is triple bottom line with full cost accounting for all of those pillars. But sustainability has been greenwashed to a place where it doesn't mean triple bottom line. It takes on just a partial meaning. And so as a member of this subcommittee here, I think it's important that the city represent the full context of what sustainability is, because then that opens the door to climate and all policy for breaking down the silos and making the transformational changes that are listed in the climate emergency resolution. So that's just a suggestion for the web pages there on the work plan, and so I'll leave that at that. And is it all right if I go through some of the items there in the energy, water, transportation, and
And this is
waste?
from 3.1?
Yes,
Okay.
these are all items there.
Generally, you would ask questions right now and then save comments till after public comment. So it sounds like you're almost commenting more than you're asking questions?
Yes, I was. Those were comments. And so I do have some questions, but they're mixed in with my comments.
So maybe, I mean, if you, I guess it's up to you, but it doesn't look like you're going to have any public comments, so you can open and close it and then just move into all your comments and questions.
I think if Tom is watching, he may want to
Want to
comment because he's active on this. I'd like to make sure Tom has a chance to comment. But I'll run through here and see where I have my question marks, and then later I'll go back and do comments. Let's see. As far as the energy offsets, I was just curious. I read through your report, Travis, and you know there's like so many 100,000 of trees and so many wind turbines. And I'm curious if offsets address consumption, or is it just kind of like buying our way out somehow? I'm you know, just for me to understand what offsets are. Like if we're not able to do it ourselves, then is an offset basically that we're kind of paying our way out?
The original intention and scope, the way it was explained when it was considered for the work plan, is that it's right now it's extremely difficult to envision getting to zero carbon just on with energy efficiency. So one is there might have to be production, and it would have to be some sort of offset, which would be some sort of carbon sequestration that was originally envisioned. So what staff did was look at a potential to having these environmental organizations in partnership operate some sort of carbon sequestration program in which it wasn't really fully, because this is really relatively pretty new, is how would individuals do some offset, but locally, not, you know, in Brazil, but the whole point was to do it locally. And it didn't go that far, in part because it's such an innovative program. It was hard to grasp it. And then, you know, COVID hit, which kind of derailed that. But as I noted there, with SB 1383, we're looking at an entire countywide opportunity in which, if this is approved, all the jurisdictions would have the opportunity to participate in purchasing mulch and compost, which by law they have to, but it would allow all the jurisdictions to kind of combine that effort and then use that compost and mulch in open areas and farms that would actually act as a carbon sequestration. So what I would say is the approach is different than originally envisioned, but the result will actually be much more beneficial at this time. So that's where that program is at this point.
Because you had mentioned for offsets about wind turbines and trees, like how many wind turbines and trees it would need to make up the municipal and the community, you know, where we wouldn't make it to the 2030 goal.
Yeah, and that's conflating the offset program that was how do we actually go out and offset versus if we were just looking at how to reduce emissions. So that was a different component. That's in the climate action plan. So that was not the intent of that. That was just for reference purposes. But this offset program was focusing on carbon sequestration specifically in that particular task item.
So we have a sustainability plan and a climate action plan, and so one of those was for one and one was for the other?
So what we have is we have that draft climate action plan, which is later on in the agenda, that focuses on a specific action to achieve certain things. But what we're talking about now is the work plan and the specific tasks that were approved by City Council and gave direction to the staff as this is what we want you to work on. So this offset was looking at how can we possibly sequester carbon. What kind of program would that look like? And so that's what I'm speaking to, and that's what that bullet point to, because they're two different, but the end result is some sort of, you know, I hate to say it, but you know, climate action, but they're very different approaches and different tasks.
Well, if tonight you could make sure that we understand offsets before we get out of here, or we understand what that means.
Sure.
And let me just jump down to water with a question. I wonder about is there any possibility of limiting landscape irrigation, or is that the San Juan Capistrano case makes it so you can't, penalize people for using higher rates? I do work around town for various people, and I see, tremendous landscape irrigation in town. And I was wondering if one way to do it, to kill two birds with one stone, would be to incentivize local trees, but disincentivize other landscape irrigation, if that would be possible.
I can't really speak to that in part because what we're discussing right now is these specific tasks that were given very explicit direction, and what you're mentioning was not part of that specific task in the work plan, but that's a possibility to discuss at some point, but I can't speak to that right now.
Well, it's a big packet, and so I have some questions on it. Let's see. So I'm just working my way through these categories: energy, water, transportation. So you're saying that these are basically listed as they are, and they've already been decided, and it's not open for question now?
No, what I'm saying is this was a specific work plan that was approved by the city council and said, staff, this is what you're to work on, these specific items.
Okay.
And so what this report specifically is an update of progress on those specific items.
Let's see. I do have a couple more question marks here. Could you tell us what a certified green business is? Like what qualifies as a certified green business?
Sure, it's a state-run program, and so initially that was an idea to increase, green certified businesses in Sonoma, specifically to help them reduce their impact, increase recycling, adopt energy conservation and efficiency, and so forth. And when COVID came, and you have to be certified, and the county general services, I forgot, is it administration? There's a office within their environmental sustainability that do lots of great things, and one of them is that they help businesses seek certification if they're requested. And so the update on that is staff's been working with the Chamber of Commerce, and we've reached out to the county, and we're actually have a meeting tomorrow to look at having a virtual workshop in November to try to elicit interest with businesses and try to get businesses to become certified. I mean, they have to meet the certification requirements, and the county will assist in that activity if they're interested. And again, that would just reduce impacts from a business perspective for local businesses.
One more quick one. In the last meeting packet, you had 30-some suggestions of ways that greenhouse gases could be reduced. And I wondered are those part of this climate action work plan, or did those kind of get whittled down and now you have the ones that you had as the biggest payday?
No, that's not part of the work plan. That's part of the climate action plan. That's agenda item 3.4. And the reason is that this work plan was approved like 9 months before this subcommittee was created, and that was an additional task, with the assistance of the development of the climate action plan. So that's a separate entity that, again, is coming up in discussion in 3.4.
So I was trying to prepare for all these, so I guess I confused some of the different categories, but
Oh, no, yeah.
but that's all the questions I have for now.
Sure.
A question on, under the miscellaneous actions, number 1, apparently you did an overhaul of the website, and it stated there that it was moved from the community section to the government section. I was on today, and I believe it is still in the community section. If you could check on that, please.
I absolutely will, yeah. I had thought that was done, but I will double check on that. Thank you.
And this, not, this was the community section,
Yeah. Yeah, it's still theirs.
Okay.
right? So I think, do we have someone on Zoom?
No, we just had a hand raised. Tom Conlon would like to speak. Go ahead and speak, Tom.
Thank you. I appreciate the retelling of the history around this this one-page summary of actions, and I too am a bit confused, and I really sympathize with staff and those of you on the council who were asking for clarifying questions. It's almost as if we need at this point some kind of a mapping of these local priority city level assignments to Travis, to the staff. Some kind of a mapping to the climate emergency resolution, to the RCPA climate strategy, to the state goals, because SB 1383, for example, is a mandatory statewide program, to the city manager's priorities, and then to the new city goals that were recently established. So it feels like it's almost like there's a need for there to be some simpler story that links all of these things together. And I really sympathize with Travis. I realize he's trying to do that, but it is a difficult task now that we have so many different things, so many different initiatives happening on so many different levels. The other thing I think that's important, and I appreciate Councilmember Felder mentioning the website. I noticed that today myself as well. We need to have some sense of the contingencies that the city will be taking into action in the event that we are falling behind in achieving the 2030 goal. So I'd like to see some idea of how either economic activity will have to be reined in, or other kinds of greenhouse gas mitigation activities will be necessary, because we certainly wouldn't want to just allow the fires to get worse, the droughts to get worse, and to have our entire economy collapse. So I appreciate all your efforts on this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Okay. So my new Sonoma pen just went dead.
Here you go. Have an exchange bank pen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So I think we need to approve to vote on 3.1, or we're moving forward.
Or I think it sounds like you wanted to have, Fred wanted to provide more comments.
You had, sorry.
Thank you, City Manager Toy. For the transportation, I wanted to make a comment about the bikes and the kind of shop local transportation. And I ride my bike around town, and I find that some of the streets are kind of narrow. It's a little bit sketchy sometimes when there's no bike lane, and the bike path itself, is a lot of people walking on it, and there is not, particularly on Napa Street East where I live, there's no green striping or anything. So I just wanted to comment that that with the cost of goods in town, for people who live in a lower area median income spectrum, biking to buy and shop local is not really feasible. Because, for example, my family, we shop all out of town because stuff is just too expensive here. So I think that that's not necessarily going to save a lot of greenhouse gases unless the bike lanes are green striped and there's like a grocery outlet in town. People could bike to events like the farmers market or to meetings and stuff, but the biking to shop locally and walking to shop locally depends on that people are able to afford it. And so that's kind of in a way like making invisible the people who can't afford it, to assume that if you make bike lanes and people will be able to bike to shop, that's in a way like Gabby Petito, where all the attention is on this white girl, but there's a whole bunch of girls of color who have disappeared who aren't in the news. So just like people who want to ride bikes and shop, if they can't do it, then they're kind of invisible in that plan. So that's just a comment I wanted to make there. And then Travis, from another comment on waste, is that you mentioned on the KSVY radio show about education for recycling, and that really only 2 or 3 things actually get recycled. So it seems like that it would be really good to educate on, exactly what to put in the bucket for people. Because when I look in the recycle bucket in my apartment complex, people do a lot of aspirational recycling. And it would be nice if we could just have something really clear, like these are the money items, the rest go to the trash or the compost. So I think that would be worth doubling down on to educate about that, what you said on the radio show. Let's see here. And then I tried to find the climate emergency resolution on the city webpage, and I couldn't find it there. So I had to fish a little bit for stuff. So I don't know, maybe you go to the government or community, then if you don't really know what you're looking for, it might be hard to find it. So it might be good to put sustainability somewhere right up front so you don't have to fish inside one category to find it. Like it's just right there, right on the main page. And that's it for that comments.
I just want to make one quick comment in responses. We actually partnered with the Earthlings Club of the Sonoma Ecology Center, and we produced videos specifically of what you can recycle, and it's on our Sort It Sonoma web page. So I think it's great because we really got the kids involved in everything. But sometimes it's difficult, I understand, to navigate all this if you don't know where on the website. But that's on the Sort It Sonoma component of the website.
And for the website, with the comments that I made in my sustainable tourism and sustainability, can that serve as my comments to staff now? Or I don't have to say that to you guys now?
I think as I understand it, yeah, we could take that as your comments on what you just said, and what was in writing.
Thank you.
Nothing. Travis, I know being with Zero Waste, I believe our garbage company is going to be adding another can or something for waste products. Is that right? For food waste?
Yes, and that's part of SB 1383 that requires basically a 3-stream system for all residents, unless there's some, physical constraints, and there are some exemptions. So every household is supposed to be offered a 3-stream. So it would be recycling the blue, the gray, black for trash, and then the green for organics. And they have been rolling them out, distributing them.
Oh, that's good. I haven't seen any, in my area, but I know that they're on their way, so that's great. Yeah.
So I notice you used the word offer to the residents. Does that mean it's not required? Do they have to accept it or not?
Well, they can, fundamentally they can do what they want, I guess, with it. The ordinance requires that everyone does that, and then the city if the ordinance is passed, the city has a certain enforcement requirement that they every household and business and institution does sort out the organics. And the Sonoma Garbage Collector has a role in that with compliance monitoring, and then some of the enforcement falls onto our JPA Zero Waste Sonoma.
So it's really not an offer, it's take it or else.
Well, it depends on how the ordinance is adopted and the policy is adopted about what type of enforcement or level of enforcement. But the law says that there's a 3-stream system that's required.
Thank you for
Just one.
explaining.
So if this enforcement thing could be a significant issue if it falls on the city or if it falls on the garbage company or whatever. But enforcement's never easy, and hopefully it's not going to get us into another complaint-driven thing like other things have happened in town.
And I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but one of the I would say unique things about SB 1383 is that the city is going to be potentially held liable for behavior of residents and businesses and so forth. So previously you would enforce directly against an entity, but now the municipality is going to be held and required to, the state can levy fines and enforce against the city to make sure that all the generators and so forth are doing their required action.
Comments, ask our questions, and now I believe I need a motion to pass this, or to,
There's no,
There's no
right.
approval. It's just an
okay.
update.
So
Yeah.
we're moving on to 3.2, discuss and consider draft SB 1383 implementation ordinance. Are there any comments?
I'm
Oh,
going
I'm
to give
sorry,
a
their
that's okay.
staff
I'm going to
report.
give a little brief staff report.
Thank you, Travis.
So SB 1383 addresses short-lived climate pollutants. It's a state-mandated law designed to reduce the landfilling of organics by 75%. Organics, when landfilled, create methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. The law had mandated that jurisdictions adopt an enforceable mandatory organic separation ordinance to be effective by January 1st, 2021. The governor just signed a bill that extends the state enforcement against jurisdictions to January 1st, 2022. It didn't change, from my reading, it doesn't change the date, but it changes the state's enforcement of that. So staff presented an update to the Community Services Environment Commission back in December 2020 on the status of SB 1383 implementation designed for the city of Sonoma. Comments and advice was received. In April 2021, staff provided an SB 1383 implementation plan, a written plan, to the City Council, and then provided a detailed presentation on the status of implementation at that time. Staff has worked with our JPA Zero Waste Sonoma, our hauler, Sonoma Garbage Collectors, and has been involved in monthly meetings with all the other county jurisdictions on some of these are highlighted in the previously discussed work plan. Of paramount importance, the city's contract with our franchised hauler has been modified and approved by the City Council, which delineates the various compliance monitoring responsibilities between the city and Sonoma Garbage Collectors, which helped really set the stage and addressed an important element of implementing the entire program. So tonight, staff is presenting a draft version of the ordinance designed to implement the state-imposed requirements. The draft ordinance is based on the model ordinance developed and provided by Zero Waste Sonoma and Cal Recycle, and has been reviewed by the city attorney. This concludes the staff's presentation on the draft ordinance, and staff would be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Are there any comments? Any comments at this point?
Guess who has questions? I have a few. Why are multifamily residential buildings not required to comply with container placement and labeling requirements?
Could you point to that in the ordinance where it says that they're excluded?
Well, I was just reading my way through, and I didn't key in on that one. But a further question might possibly shed light on that. But that's a comment that I have. It's not a question. So we'll just shelve that question. The next question is on oversight on commercial edible food generators. And to see that the edible food is being disposed. Are these people going to self-certify that they're doing it, or Councilmember Felder mentioned the enforcement there. So I'm just curious about this, you know, because it seems like that if it said that, you know, intentional spoiling wasn't allowed, but it seems like you need guidelines there to make it so that they don't donate it like the day before and not the last day before it spoils. So how is the city gonna figure out that people are complying with actually reusing the food rather than just throwing it away?
Great question. So part of that is that program hasn't really been fully fleshed out. So the ordinance sets forth the requirements, and we're working with our JPA Zero Waste Sonoma to help develop that particular program, because one of the issues is the interconnectedness of the communities. And so, and there's a lot of work with Redwood, Food Bank is going to be a major player in that. And
Okay.
so, because it's cross-jurisdictional and so forth, they're working with that. And so they're in the process of developing a plan. Part of the ordinance requires the city to do a capacity plan to try to figure out if there's enough capacity to handle this. And part of that planning would likely involve integration with other areas as well as directed by, as outlined by Zero Waste Sonoma. So everything can't necessarily stop at the border because everything's integrated. So they're helping develop this particular plan for that.
I want to sign up for some of that reused edible food from Whole Foods. Just get me on the list. What's the Good Samaritan Act?
That's reduces liability. If I recollect, that reduces liability. There's this perception that if I give away food, I'm going to be held liable. And I know there's federal law and other requirements that say, no, you're not held liable if what you're doing is in good faith effort.
And what about food left over from farmers markets or events, that there's lots of food, and is there any provisions about that? Like if they make like 50 corn dogs but only sell 35?
No, the regulations are tiered, are based on what's called Tier 1 and Tier 2 commercial food generators. And so it's the larger facilities. I'd have to turn to the page, but it talks about particular seat size. It's like larger grocery stores. It's actually not going to cover restaurants or none of the restaurants I believe are covered because they're just not large enough. It's really super large restaurants and event space, which we don't have. So it's going to be mostly the grocery stores, supermarkets, schools, and I don't believe hospital would be covered. So that's the requirement for a size base.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For enforcement, is the city planning to add to the code enforcement staff or stay with the same level of staffing for that?
I don't have an answer for that at this time.
And do you know what the fines are, like for people who don't comply with putting the right trash in the right barrel, or who don't comply with the edible food rules?
Well, obviously nothing, this is just the draft, so nothing is set, but it refers to, I believe, the standard fine structure in the municipal code is the reference. I can cite that.
I think that's right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's actually on page 36 of the agenda packet under 7.10.120, which states that any violation is subject to the provisions of section 1.12 of the Sonoma Municipal Code.
Thanks, I read that, but I didn't go to hunt it down in the municipal code. But overall, I guess just a quick comment. This looks great. So
Well, I'm just concerned that we're now creating a new monster called the garbage police, who are going to come around and see that you've got the right stuff in the right container. And I hope that especially in the initial introduction of the program, or when people are required to do this, that there's going to be some leeway in terms of enforcement, because otherwise you're just going to create chaos in the community about the way you're getting all these things forced upon them. And I think we can be a kindler, gentler city in the terms of enforcement, at least initially.
Yeah, maybe I can chime in. In my experience from other communities in which we're a little ahead of the game, it was more education and outreach. That's what you're going to do, because most of it is the compost and it's the food. And the problem with the food is the yuck factor. Nobody likes to store it on their kitchen sink or wherever they put it and then carry it out to their green bin and dump it. And so what we did is we did a lot of education and outreach. You can go as far as giving people little garbage pails to put their compost in. And that's what we did. And ultimately after that, what you do is something that's like a, whatever they call it, lid flip audits, where you go out, and people don't like that either, where you actually examine their garbage stream to make sure that they're properly sorting it the way they should, and then you follow up with education and outreach. So this is just the first step. We aren't interested in going out and finding people for whatever, putting a can in the compost bin or banana peel in your garbage. So I think it's all education and outreach and people understanding what the major goal is, which is diversion.
And one comment, what's interesting about Sonoma garbage collectors is they have this unique system where when they pick up a bin, they actually can see it visually, which is, most of them flip it over to the side, they never see it. So that would help identify any problem areas. But the focus with all the jurisdictions in Zero Waste Sonoma has always been education and outreach is the primary goal.
Excuse my ignorance, but are the organic materials that go into that that container go in loose, or can they be bagged in something?
They're preferably not plastic bagged. They can be paper bagged. One of the problems is it's a problem with a composting facility to pull the bags out. But this is something that is an important element that we're trying to work with the compost facility. Our compost material goes to Napa Composting in American Canyon, and we're talking about the degree of which plastic bags will be accepted. So this is something we're working on.
Because what I'm thinking is that you create a huge cleanliness problem with the garbage can if the people are not on top of it and washing it out or rinsing it out periodically. That it's not going to be a good scene. So I hope that we have some accommodation for being able to bag it.
Absolutely. As the city manager was talking about, this is the so-called yuck factor. If there's barriers for people to do the right thing, they're not going to do the right thing. And so all the jurisdictions are trying to grapple with this, is how can we make it as easy as possible, and education outreach, but you have to make it easier as possible. So your comment is definitely well received.
And I think what Travis is saying, like, you have those green compostable bags, but not all facilities can handle that. A bag that says it's compostable or something that says it's compostable doesn't mean your specific facility can actually compost it. It just depends on your facility and the ability to do that, and it sounds like those are issues all trying to be addressed.
In our household, we have a 2.5 gallon Friedman's paint pail with a lid on it in our kitchen, and so all of the compostables goes in that with the lid on it, and then we take it out to our trash. And in the green barrel, we put like a layer of leaves at the bottom so it doesn't all stick to the bottom. So we keep a pile of leaves near the garbage can, and then that's how it's worked for us. And it hasn't been too yucky. You know, I mean, we feel like we're doing good because we're doing the right thing. We don't want to make methane. We don't want to be part of that. So if people once they get on the program, just like bringing their own bags to the grocery store, or just like on plaza events of, you know, using non-styrofoam stuff or not plastic cutlery or straws, once they get used to it, they get it going. So hopefully we can ramp it up and get people working on this and, not fine them like in the CSEC. We didn't want to be punitive right off the bat with plaza events, but after a while, you got to get people going on the program because you want to avoid this methane creation.
So I think Travis actually, and I know from Mr. Toy, he's pretty innovative and he listens to what they're doing in other cities, probably even from Fairfax. I'm sure there are ideas out there they'll probably bring forth, and just when there's a need, right? Somebody will discover a way to do this, so that'll be great. I'm really positive about that. So I think we've heard questions and comments. So are we ready? Is there anyone? I'd like to open this up to the public. No one here. I'll close that part and then Zoom.
Yes, Tom Conlon would like to speak. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Agramonte. I agree that the city is fortunate to have Travis Wagner. Bit of a coup for the city to have such a highly qualified waste expert at this critical time. A little tiny city of 11,000. I also share Councilmember Felder's concerns about not over policing this and making sure that the program is implemented smoothly initially. I do think that the yuck factor can be managed. I put an old Sonoma Market plastic container in my refrigerator for any meat that happens to come through my house that needs to be disposed of. It keeps it from starting to smell, and I take it out right the night that the truck comes to take the green waste away. And that's a way that I work around that particularly yucky factor. I just, when Commissioner Alabach mentioned the concerns about multifamily, I did a quick search of the document, and I think I have the citations he was looking for. In section 710040, requirements for commercial businesses, there are several subsections that begin with the phrase excluding multifamily residential dwellings. And I'm pointing specifically to sections E, I guess section G, which doesn't exclude, it just is all about an exclusion, and then section I. And it does appear that those are broad exemptions for multifamily dwellings. And I'm a little concerned that if this was in the template, it would surprise me because that would appear to not comply with the legislature's intent behind the bill. To include multifamily residential dwellings within the scope of commercial businesses that are regulated by SB 1383. So if that was introduced at the local level, it would be a concern for us. But I just flagged that because I think that was a good catch on Fred's part. I have not had a chance to really review this in great detail, but I do trust that we're in good hands with Mr. Wagner. So thank you.
No other public comments, Madam Mayor.
No, no more? Okay, thank you, Mr. Conlon.
I have a comment about the on page 17 of SB 83. I'm not sure if it was of the SB 83 or of the packet. I'm curious, or I'm concerned that if we have high density infill housing in multifamily residents, then they could possibly be exempt, that we need to make sure that city planning makes space for recycling containers and doesn't pack people in to high density areas and then don't have the proper ability to separate the trash and the organics with the container. So that was a concern that I had, that That, for example, if we had, you know, a Safeway parking lot, 3-story, high-density place, that to make sure that planning makes sure that all those people have the proper amount of containers to deal with their waste, and that we don't get some kind of exemption for our multifamily residential. So that's one comment there. I think that might be my only comment here. Yeah, I think that's my only comment. Other than that, I thought that it was interesting that it was necessary to define radioactive waste in the initial part. It was fun to look at all the things that got defined, you know, and I could see, you know, why you would need to define supermarket and grocery store and corner store, you know, but it was interesting there. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Okay, well, looks like we've had our comments and questions for 3.2. We'll move on to 3.3. Discuss and consider draft environmentally preferable procurement policy.
So one of the components of SB 1383 is that jurisdictions are required to annually procure a minimum amount of organics materials, mulch or compost, and to purchase only paper and paper products with a minimum post-consumer recycling content. So the city has two options that the law offers. One is to codify these requirements directly into the ordinance that would be considered, or to codify a reference in the ordinance to an adopted environmentally preferable procurement policy. Staff is recommending to adopt number 2, which is to codify a reference in the ordinance to a procurement policy, which allows for in adopting this, it would allow for flexibility to update the procurement policy as necessary without having to go back and modify the municipal code through ordinance. So attached in your agenda packet is a draft of the proposed environmentally preferable procurement policy. The draft policy is based on the model policy developed by Zero Waste Sonoma. The proposed policy contains the SB 1383 required paper and recovered organics requirements, so that would meet the letter and intent of the law. In addition, staff is recommending the inclusion of other components, including a general approach policy statement to modernize the city's green procurement policy, and it also includes some additional standards, such as looking at HVAC systems, appliances, electronics, and vehicles. So that concludes staff's presentation on the draft environmentally preferable procurement policy, and would be glad to answer any questions.
Point where I'm asking for comments on 3.3. Comments?
I have a couple questions. The county organic waste is shipped out of the county now. When is that going to be rectified? It seems to me that the county has got to own our own waste. We can't be in a place where there's no place for a composting facility. So do you have any idea when this shipping compost out of the county is going to be fixed?
Not at this time. There was a facility sited at Santa Rosa at the wastewater treatment facility. The contract fell through, and I know that they're working on replacing that or opening it up again for bid, is the latest I heard. But the county has negotiated, and we have. What's interesting is there's not enough capacity in the state to handle all the organics that's going to come about. So our JPA has made arrangements with the 3 area compost facilities. So it would be Napa, Novato, and Ukiah to handle all of the organics in the county. So we're actually in good shape, but they're trying to work on siting a organics facility in Santa Rosa.
And we're all going to get free compost from all of this, and our gardens are just going to be going gangbusters with great tomatoes?
I have no response to that. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question for number 6 here, pollution prevention products and practices. I was curious about the cemetery and the pre-emergent product that goes on there that the city buys. And I, I, I don't know how something that stops everything from growing can possibly be environmentally good. So I would just question what that product is that they put on the lower cemetery that makes it so nothing grows. If you look on the other side of the fence, there's grass growing, and down in the lower part of the cemetery, it's just been brown for years. And so I'd like to find out what that stuff is and whether it's actually okay.
Are you speaking of the valley?
The lower mountain cemetery.
I see, okay.
So that's a question I have. You probably can't answer that now, but that's all my questions for the EPP.
Yeah, I can't answer that for sure. And certainly one of the things of the intent of the policy is to always look at alternatives if they exist and they're feasible and they meet all the requirements. But I certainly can't answer that question at this point.
Because I think that would be worth finding out what that stuff is. And as an alternative, you have local homeless people who would have give meaning to their lives to be able to do something productive, like age-old grass cutting techniques. So, and if that could help, then that would be a win-win situation rather than using the toxic pre-emergent on the cemetery.
So, Travis, I understand that, well, the city, we eliminated, and I'm sorry, I can't remember of using it anywhere on city property.
Oh, I think it was glyphosate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think that involves that. I wouldn't think so.
This
Yeah.
is pre-emergent. It's different.
Yeah. Glyphosate's like Roundup. So
Right.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know what specific product that they're using.
Could we find out?
You have others?
I'm done.
You're done, and Bob? I'm done. Well, I'm done, and I'd like to open it up to the public.
Yes, Madam
No.
Mayor, Tom Conlon would like to speak. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, there we go. We're going back and forth on the mute. Thank you. Yes, that would be a question, I think, for the Public Works Director of the cemetery pre-emergent herbicide question. I think this is a great draft policy here, the environmental preferable procurement policy. I did want to draw attention to the city's existing city purchasing procedure, chapter 3.04 of the city code. And there is in there 304060 green purchasing policy. This is obviously a much more robust, this newly proposed policy is much more robust than what's in the existing policy. So just make sure that that is cleaned up in the final drafting. Thank you for your consideration of my comments tonight.
Thank you. So I think we are finished with comments and questions, and we can now move on to 3.4, discuss and consider draft climate action plan.
So a component of the climate emergency resolution was the creation of this joint subcommittee. Subsequently, a charter was adopted by resolution to set forth the charge and initiatives. And one of the initiatives was the development of a climate action plan to meet the city's goal to reduce city operations and the community's greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2030. In supporting this endeavor, at the inaugural meeting of the subcommittee in February of this year, staff provided a climate action plan framework / discussion document to get things started. Based on direction offered by the subcommittee, a improved draft climate action plan was then provided for the April 2021 meeting. There have been no there have been some modifications made to that climate action plan, which is presented in tonight's agenda packet, and the subcommittee has not met since April 2021 for various reasons. So that concludes the staff presentation on the draft climate action plan, and we'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do anyone have any comments or questions?
I have comments, but not questions.
Okay, comment?
Does comments come after public
We're
comment?
sort of mixing it around.
Yeah,
this evening.
it's at this point, I think it's just really up to you.
You can do whatever you like.
Yeah, I have some comments. In the city's climate emergency resolution, like I started out with my comments at the beginning, that it mentions climate in all policy, but it seems like the climate action plan is completely centered on greenhouse gas emissions. And so I just make a quick quote from the climate emergency resolution where it says, whereas the city of Sonoma needs to do everything in its power to convert at emergency speed to a truly sustainable community, economically, socially, and ecologically, and participate effectively in a regional just transition through climate mobilization efforts. So here in the city's climate emergency resolution, you have a triple bottom line, full cost accounting sustainability statement. So I'm wondering where in the first four steps that we see that kind of triple bottom line, full cost accounting sense in the climate emergency resolution. I'm just curious about that. So so I think that from the kind of direction that I would like to give as a member of this subcommittee, I would like to see more of a climate and all policy scope to this than just emissions, and some ways that I could see where this was linking to cross-departmentally, and that the city was mobilizing this in a systemic way and not just environmentally. So that's a comment that I have, and that goes to my other comments that I made in my sustainability webpage stuff. So I think that those first four steps could use some review as far as putting in the economic and social pillars of sustainability and not just the environmental. Now, I don't know how you would do that, but I think that's part of what that climate emergency resolution statement said. Let's see. So that's one comment. And then is this where we talk about the offsets?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
actually included in the climate action
Okay.
plan. So.
So let's see. I think you mentioned. Did I get it right that it was 50% of the community would need to be offsets to 2030?
Yeah, so the offsets here are looking at you can't get to zero with our current technology about energy consumption, right? So how are you going to get to that zero? And so the point of that was just to provide reference that there would need to be alternative approaches to getting to that zero. Because buildings consume electricity and energy and so forth. So, those were provided as references or just to put it into context. The plan wasn't proposing to build wind turbines in any way or suggesting that, but it was just saying, here's how to think about this to put it into context.
Because when I was looking at how many wind turbines it would take, to offset the community not reaching the 2030 goal, I was wondering, well, if we already have evergreen, what benefit would wind turbines do if we could get people to do evergreen, or is that community? Sometimes they get confused with municipal and community because the city already has evergreen. Mm-hmm. but I think that the penetration of evergreen into the community is below 5%.
Last time I checked, I believe it was 8%.
So it's still pretty darn low.
It is, and it's not zero carbon. It's lower carbon, but it's also locally renewable energy. But clean. We've made the community's made a major achievement with our Sonoma Clean Power using Clean Start as the default choice. Although that is not 100%, some customers have decided to opt out and use PG&E. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I'm just curious where would buying wind power be an offset more than people can get by buying evergreen?
Well, again, the point was just to contextualize. If you want to think about if you're trying to decrease energy, would be the equivalent that you need to do. I'm not aware that we can purchase wind turbine power because it goes through either Sonoma Clean Power or PG&E.
So that was just your examples.
Exactly, just to contextualize it. Yeah.
So one of my bottom line concerns is how are we going to reach this goal? Or Tanya Nara said it was a stretch goal. It was a very ambitious goal, and we probably wouldn't make it. And she said, I think that the county is planning on making 80%, or, people are looking at the finish line and saying, oh, we're not going to make it. So then we need to have offsets and backup plans. So how confident are you that the city is going to be able to make it with the things that they're able to do and with being able to buy our way out with offsets?
Well, we have to look at it between municipal operations and the community. So, and a lot of this is driven. Well, a large percentage is driven by technology. So, with transportation being about 70% of the greenhouse gases, there's very little that can be done until technology exists and people choose to embrace that technology. Electrification of vehicles, for example. With municipal operations, it's also partly technology, but I definitely think the city's definitely headed in the right path. There's a number of initiatives that we're doing right now, but knowing what we know now, there may have to be some sort of offset. For example, that might be a purchase of off-site solar production, sort of like larger scale solar panels. Just as an example, I'm not suggesting that would be the approach, but something along that lines to achieve that goal. But there's other things that staff is looking at right now, and that's increasing the PV production on municipal buildings, on roofs, and making our existing systems more efficient and repairing some of the issues to increase production. But also we're looking at programs right now. We have a meeting tomorrow about decreasing consumption through looking at a large-scale lighting upgrade option. So it's always looking at decreasing consumption, increasing production, and trying to achieve that so it equals that zero goal.
Was another one of my suggestions was to emphasize conservation over green replacement, because people think if they get green replacement, then they don't have to change their behavior or sacrifice. If they get a Prius, they can still do everything that they did, so they don't change their behavior. So I think it's worth emphasizing conservation in the climate plan, and I think that the city is sort of obligated or does follow the RCPA, and that the RCPA has climate and all policy and mentioned that we need a urgent action commensurate with the scope of the crisis. And so I would like to underline as my feedback as a member of this committee that the city take a more urgent emergency stance on this, and not that we're just going to wait for technology, but we got to really rattle the cage of the community and get people to pay attention to this, because if it is I mean, I read the news and it's really discouraging. You know, I grew up thinking that we were going to get nuked by Russia, and now it's like the sixth great extinction. So it's, in a way, it's a good time to be alive because of all the material prosperity. But you know, I just feel from a moral and a conscience standpoint that that we're really obligated to take this seriously as an emergency and take urgent action on it. So I would like to see the city kind of up its game a little bit on this, you know, to the extent possible. And I guess that's all I got to say now.
Could you just clarify, because I'm not sure exactly what you mean, because that's kind of a large comment, but what specifically are you?
Oh, like
Some
well,
examples?
this subcommittee is in charge of you know, looking at the climate emergency resolution and translating that into actions and implementation. And so if as Tom mentioned, that we haven't met since April, and you know, you read news from climate scientists in the world, like 11,000 scientists say that it's really grim and we really got to take action. And so when I look out at the city, I just don't see that kind of urgency. So I think that to have the city council and commissions and have a cross departmental awareness in the city, that would bring it a little bit more. So I know that's kind of general, but you know, it's like if you're a basketball team and you're losing, you got to train harder. You know, you got to lift weights, you got to work at it, and so that's kind of what I'm asking the city to do is you know, go to the sustainability page and make it triple bottom line, full cost accounting, and just do the urgency that the RCPA says. I just don't feel that urgency.
So, if I may ask more questions, I think a little struggle. I understand urgency, and if it's this committee needs to meet more often, that's one thing. But adding to the web page and doing some things like that, I'm in my mind, I don't know. It may be in your mind, but I don't see how that creates that sense of urgency. And for the council, I know it's important because I look at all these actions. Is it going beyond what we're doing here, or speeding up the time frame for? This is a climate action plan. Sorry, I'm looking at the potential climate actions for municipal operations, and it has short term, medium term, and so on. Are you suggesting medium term become more short term, or I think we need, for this committee, at least for the council, ultimately that be recommended is something is what exactly, how do you define urgent? What type of action are you expecting the council to address or take, or the recommended actions in order to achieve that sense of urgency? Besides this committee meeting more often, I think that one's fairly tangible.
I think one thing would be that Travis could be allowed to create a couple of parallel tracks. So like there's like a track that's faster, track that's more moderate, a track that we're going to wait for technology, or a track where we're going to do as much as we can so that we're not waiting on technology, and just you know, something like that where the experts could say this is what we need to do to get to the zero emissions or by 2030 or 80%, and if people don't buy EVs and stuff, then we're screwed. Or I don't know, what I'd like to see is kind of a temperature check to know where we are, so that if we're not going to get there, then we'll go, okay, this is what we're lacking. And so then that's where the urgency and the timing comes in, so that if Travis can lay out some scenarios where there's like an X factor, if no one can, a lot of people can't afford EVs, then we're not going to get there. Then what kind of offsets are we going to need? Just some different scenarios. Does that make sense?
So, if I understand it, there's the municipal side, which we have some level of control on, And then there's the community side, which we have limited control on, and it's the community side that's really going to make the greatest difference. And what you're suggesting is you'd like Travis to perhaps come up with, I'll call it, my words, some type of, not so much of a plan, but a strategy that lays out that if everybody did X, Y, and Z, we would get to a certain level. And if they did even more, then maybe you could get to zero emissions. I think it's, well, from my perspective, I don't think in 2030 we're not getting to zero emissions, just like zero waste. You're not going to ever have the zero waste. But, so you're asking for some alternative strategy that could be laid out to the community. If you wanted to do your share and you did this, then that would help this much toward the overall goal. Is that something you're talking about?
Yeah, that's great. And then if we weren't, we could benchmark how far we needed to go.
Is that something you can do, Travis? Is it all kind of theoretical?
I really would have to ponder that about how. Yeah, just have to ponder that. I know because we can benchmark it by, greenhouse gas emissions inventory. That's what we use. That's going to help identify how far we've gone and what we need to do, and it also helps identify what categories we're working on. And so, transportation is the biggest thing. So certainly could address scenarios of what needs to be done. Yeah. Does that?
So it sounds like you need to think about it
Yeah,
first,
definitely
and then
think about it. But
and then you could talk about it later
Yeah.
with maybe with the committee.
Sure.
On your
One
thoughts.
thought that I had is that I live on the unincorporated east side, and anytime I come through town here, I drive past like tremendous remodel jobs where people have taken an actually perfectly good house and tore it down to 1 2x4 and call it a remodel, and then just consuming tremendous amount of resources. It's just astounding to me that the level of consumption that's happening on Sonoma's east side and unincorporated east side. So I mean that's not within the purview of the city to tell people that they can't remodel, but maybe if we need to dial down, and Americans are the alpha consumers of the world, and then you've got alpha consumers in Sonoma with the real estate as it is, maybe part of the plan can be to encourage people to be content with what they have and not aspire to like a giant mansion for a small family. But I'm rambling. But I think that that if you think about it and put a track out there so that people can look at it and say, okay, if we do this, we're going to get close to 2030, and if we don't, we're going to be this far back. And if we're that far back and everybody's that far back in the world, then the ocean is going to rise and all this stuff is going to happen. So that people can see that if we do our proportional part, then that's the best we can do for our small city. I'm not asking us to save the world for who we are, but just to do our fair part.
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up because a good example, of course, not the greenhouse gases, but the water saving kits. We've probably passed out hundreds. We just did 50 down at Altamadrone, and those are all little benchmarks that we feel that they're we're going through. I don't know how many more buckets we have, but I'm certainly think we can get even more. And I think they're being advertised. And whenever I've been there on a Saturday with you, Bob, the cars constantly are coming in to get buckets, and even people who are walking through get a bucket. They understand the purpose. So maybe the proof is in the pudding when you see these things being used, or maybe we should publicize that even better, how many we've passed out. There are senior complexes here that we might consider bringing them to, because they have sinks and tubs also. So those are, I guess, with the greenhouse gases, comes down to democracy, which is really a rough thing to manage. You know, especially EVs. I'd love one, but my husband has distance anxiety. That's all he thinks about. So I don't want to ramble. Bob, do you have anything that you'd like to share? No. Yep, I think we've done this one through. So we're past, we've done 3.4.
But we still need to go out for
And
public
now out to
comment.
the public.
Great, thank you. Tom Conlon would like to speak. Go ahead, Tom.
Yep.
Thank you for indulging me yet again. This is a fascinating conversation, and I'm glad that we're having it. That's what the function of this committee is. We really do need to imagine ourselves in a different place, and that's what this action plan is helping us have this conversation and helping us to start imagining. I've read a book called The Uninhabitable Earth, and I recommend a documentary on Netflix this year, Breaking Boundaries. These texts really point out how different the world is going to be. It's already very different, but how different it's going to be if we do what City Manager Toy just said, not get to zero by 2030. I think we have to imagine what it's going to be like if climate change causes the food system to collapse in the southern or in the equatorial area, and we have migrants, really desperate people. We already have desperate people, but if we have large numbers of desperate people, it's going to knock our best laid plans for economic sustainability and development completely off track, as we've already seen the forest fires do and the pandemic recently do. Travis is absolutely correct. Transportation, 73%. I just point to the climate action plan. It looks like there's no waste numbers in the inventory that's listed there. I don't know if that's still true. That needs to be addressed by the RCPA team. I'll try to remember that at the next meeting. But I think this committee needs to think about what are the contingencies if we get to 2025 and we aren't making progress toward the 2030 goal, and maybe we've had a firestorm burn through Mission Highlands and down through the east side of town to MacArthur Place, say, and we're knocked off our game because of these other very pressing emergencies. What are we going to do, knowing that the temperature is getting hotter? Are we going to some things that occur to me, and this is just for conversation. We could stop traffic on many of the streets. We could simply say, we're not going to let traffic drive on the street. You're going to have to walk or bicycle on this street. We could reduce the sale of gasoline for certain hours. The city has police powers to do these kinds of things to protect us and to protect our economy and our vulnerable citizens. So I'm not advocating those things, but I am advocating opening up a space to start thinking about these kinds of things in this committee. Thank you for your consideration of my comments tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Conlon.
Public comments?
Me? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. We're thinking it might be helpful if Travis maybe talks about some of the next steps for those those 4 items you just discussed, because we didn't really talk about that.
So this would be for not the work plan, that was really an update, but for 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, which is well, let me talk about well, let me put my glasses on. 3.2 and 3.3 specifically, at this step, then it would go to the CSEC for consideration, and they would then consider and vote on whether they would recommend it going or for approval by the city council would be the next step. And those all related to SB 1383. The climate action plan at this point stays with this subcommittee until it's considered ready for full city council approval, but it's currently in its current state. It needs work, and I've gotten some direction and some suggestions on that. And so it would be reintroduced through a revised version would be represented to this subcommittee at its next meeting date.
Is there any chance that we could bump up the schedule of this to move a little quicker and not wait like another 2 months before we met?
I don't have an answer to that right now.
So,
Yes.
I guess, how long do you think it'll take you? I guess that's the question. How much time do you need to work on the climate action plan? Like 30 days, 60 days, 45 days?
Probably at least 60 days, because most of my time has been focused and will focus on SB 1383 because there has been a legal requirement that get done, so that has taken most of my time. And as I've always mentioned, that has a profound impact. That probably has the greatest potential for greenhouse gas reduction, specifically with methane on the community, than anything else that we can do that is pretty low cost. And that's the organic separation. So it is important, and it's related specifically to climate action. And that's the priority. So I suspect 2 months, depending on how that goes with SB 1383, is probably reasonable.
So really you're talking, you would be into the holiday period. So really you're talking about really January to have the next meeting, unless you squeeze one in December.
Yeah, it's possible. I think we would have to just see how that goes and see how SB 1383 goes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it sounds like if we can get the other things done, then we have a better idea if you could have another meeting in December, or we have to wait till January. That's
Yeah.
what it sounds like.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, so I actually have the next items, 3.5 and 3.6, if you'd like to move to 3.5.
3.5, discuss and consider role of CSEC, role of commissioners, and staff resources for CSEC.
Okay, so we put this on here just to have this discussion, just to be clear about the roles of this committee, the joint committee, and then the CSEC, and then staff. So I think for staff, obviously Travis is part-time, and we have funding, I think, through the end of the fiscal year. And I know as staff, we believe we need to continue with the sustainability coordinator. So as we move through the budget process, we'll also build that in for that, because it's a position that's needed in order to just accomplish all these different goals. But we wanted to be clear. We were kind of looking, Travis had pointed out to me the charter for this committee, and then we were looking at the CSEC. And we wanted to be clear that for staff, the committees don't direct staff. I mean, staff is a resource, and staff will take advice and work on different things, but the committees in general don't direct staff. And then we wanted to be clear on policy as well. This body may comment on policy. Ultimately, all policy decisions really have to go to the council for approval. So it's more of a recommendation and advice. So you have this joint committee, and whatever you say here probably comes back to the CSCC at some form or fashion, and then back up to council for approval. So we just wanted to make that really, really clear ultimately to the CSCC when you have your joint meeting, and that's the next meeting, about the roles and responsibilities. And then, a subset of that for the CSCC, I think, what's a little confusing is the original charter, or I'll call it the municipal code for the Community Services Environmental Commission, has more of a recreation type feel to it than opposed to climate action, right? A lot of places have a specific climate action committee and maybe a Parks and Recreation committee, but you don't really have that here. You have this Community Services Environmental Commission, which seemed to be more Parks and Recreation driven as I read it, but it's morphed into having a climate action take to it. And so I think maybe I'm jumping to item 3.6, but I think that's something that needs to be discussed at that joint meeting between the council and CSEC to make sure we're clear over what those responsibilities are or what the focus should be of the committee. And I think for this committee, I think it's pretty clear. This was a great meeting. It seems like we need to hold it more often, but COVID created some situations. But I think Travis has done a great job getting us this far. We're pretty close in SB 1383 and procurement policy. Climate action needs some work. And it sounds like one of the things that this committee talked about was Travis needs to maybe ponder the concept of, is there some other things out there that we could recommend to the community to undertake in order to achieve the goals, hoping with education and outreach would encourage people to take those actions, because we're somewhat limited in our municipal abilities to force these different issues. And so that's all that item 3.5 was about. I just wanted to have that discussion, and then that morphs into 3.6 about the agenda for the joint meeting that's coming up. So any questions?
You have any questions, Bob?
In this item, is the role of commissioners referring to CSEC commissioners or commissioners on this committee?
It's the role of the CSEC. I mean, you're on that committee and this committee too. So
Well, we have a history of being bigger than our britches. So that's good. I'm glad that you mentioned those things. I'm really looking forward to the joint meeting with the city council, and here I mentioned direction because I think that this committee was created to give direction of how to follow the CER. So I think here, that's probably okay for me to be saying that, even though I'm not on the city council.
Oh, I think that it's important to separate the climate action from the CSEC role for the most part, because I agree with you that the charter sure looks more like Parks and Rec than it does the environmental aspects, the global environmental aspects. So I can see that you can be involved with that as CSEC, but I think since we have this committee which is directly dealing with it, I think this is a place it belongs.
Well, thank you, Mr. Felder. And so I wrote here ad hoc down to CSEC and down to council, or is it opposite with what you're sharing? You gave an example.
So this committee, so you have this committee. Oh, well, that's a good question. In my mind, without looking at this again, I was thinking this committee, then whatever came out of here would go to the CSEC and then back up to council,
And back.
as opposed directly to the council. At least that's how I was thinking it should work.
That's what I thought you said.
One thing I want to mention is that, as kind of a context for how climate issues came into the CSEC wheelhouse, is that we got the Climate Action 2020 plan to vet for the city council. And so when that first came out, that was a long time that we were working on that. And so that's, kind of where that got going. And that was all through, regular channels. That Climate Action 2020 plan got dropped on us. We didn't go, we want it.
Point of clarification, this now is a standing committee, is it not? Which is why we're forced into a Brown Act situation and everything else. So that means that there's no limited term on this thing. We can keep going for a long time.
So this is, in the future, this isn't going to be referred to as special meeting?
Well, it's a little funny as I read this. It says, oops, sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, it says meet at least annually, no more than quarterly, unless a special meeting is called. If the meeting occurs on a quarterly basis, meeting would generally occur in the second. It's a little odd here because it's sort of referring to a regular meeting on a quarterly basis, maybe, but really you only need to meet a minimum of annual. And then if you do another meeting during the quarter, then it would be a special. So it's not particularly clear. You could argue every meeting is a special meeting. But that being said, I think we can figure it out. I think the bottom line is it sounds like your regular meetings would be the second Wednesday of the following months. But so list November, but if we're not ready in November, then we would have a special meeting in December or January, and then I guess your regular meeting would be in February.
So just a clarification, when it was originally set up, because there's one staff person that staffs the CSEC and the subcommittee, is that the meetings would alternate so that they could be staffed. So that was the one of the original ideas why it was quarterly. And if you look at the municipal code, I believe the CSEC is also supposed to be quarterly, but it had gone into monthly. So it was pushing that back, and then that way staff could support that on the second Wednesday of every month would be that designated time for either one of those entities.
Well, I'm sorry. You have another nuance. If you have it as a special meeting, you get a little bit more of a break on when you can get the agenda out and public because of the Brown, all of the stuff with public meetings. So it is advantageous time-wise for staff to have that special meeting designation frequently.
But then we get a 70-page packet with only a day to read it, and if we're working, then we can't really be well prepared.
70 pages is nothing compared to what we deal with.
I'll say something, and you might come to you, Madeline.
Good, thank you.
The CSEC was really deeply embroiled in plaza events before Lisa Jansen was hired, and so it was just event after event after event, budgets. And so when Lisa was hired, it was by everyone's consent. It was easier for Lisa to deal with these events than to have us kind of micromanage it from the peanut gallery. And so that's worked out well. Unless an event has got some issues, then they go on the consent calendar, and then we don't spend a lot of time on that. So that the purview, and then there's barely any parks items ever on the CSEC. You know, every now and then something about the Overlook Trail or Montini. So that, you know, it's probably better that it's gone to quarterly now. But you know, just saying that what is the CSEC going to do if events are mostly with Lisa Jansen and climate and stuff is mostly with this standing committee, then the agendas will probably be fairly thin.
Although you do have your recreation task force out there, so that's supposed to report to the CSEC.
And the tree committee also.
I know we digress, but do CSEC members still like to be part of the tree committee?
I know John Donnelly is on it, and he's liking it a lot.
Oh, okay. And a special event, does the CSEC would prefer?
I think that it's good to have community oversight of those things when there is an issue. So, like, for example, the farmers market over the years gets a blow up or something, and so that gets a format where the public can come and comment about those things and not have it just be at the staff level. So I think it is important that at least events that are like probationary or have some problem then can come under questioning of the CSEC, and then the city and the council can look at that and take the advice of what those members have to say.
But generally, you feel that Lisa, it just becomes.
Lisa does a great job, and if there's no issues, then there's no need for the CSEC to micromanage that because she's got the events down.
Travis, you know, one other thing I wanted to mention, I know Sarah Tracy does a really great job of outreach, and I think we reach, I don't know, I keep hearing of 4,000 or something people with that. possibly in what you're working on, maybe that's something that could, I mean, I'm sure Sarah's part of this anyway, but there might be a way that we amplify, you know, as they build. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Maybe building an audience to something more, where people are more aware of of what you're doing. I know we are sort of the envy of many cities that we have you. I hear your name bantered about, you know, that you're doing such a great job. And but it would be nice, you know, you're working hard. These are important, as Fred has offered. These are very important issues, and it might be, you know, a good idea to be able to share what's going on, the issues of, you know, our the waste, all of the things that are coming up. I don't even know how you would do that, but possibly amplify whatever she's doing and how to build a broader audience. I think it's around 4,000 or something like that, which is great. And, you know, or not, you know, thank you.
Yeah, Sarah is great, and I know we've chatted about trying to develop a strategy, because when you do communications, to either shoot it out or you have a strategy in how you do it. And I know we've talked about that, and I think that's what you're saying, because it's kind of piecemeal. You know, I do a little radio bit on KSVY once a month to talk about that, and there's this here and there, but it's not a strategy. And when you do communications and outreach, you got to think about how does this all fit to make it as effective as possible. So that's a great comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that Mr. Toy's with us now, one of the things that I felt is that he's so creative. And I know that he doesn't, it's not like a ego thing to not to look to other cities, what they're doing and what makes sense and what works well. Because, you know, why reinvent the wheel? Other cities may be doing this. And it's unfortunate, a lot of bigger cities here that have lots of staff and lots of money. And so maybe, you know, just to sort of, you know, I worked for Catholic school, and the name of their program was CASE. I forget what it stands for, but the last two letters, SE, were steal everything. Anything anyone does in fundraising for Catholic schools, steal what they've got. So, you know, this might be, it's a higher authority, but I will give that to you.
Well, we pulled together, the Earth Day celebration. Part of that was to bring attention and engage the community, and obviously COVID derailed that, so we did the virtual. But that's something that hopefully everything will be set, the emergency will be dissipated, and we can do that. And that's probably one of the best things to engage the community. It's not just the passive of here's a tweet kind of thing, but it's a way to bring the community and participate. And I thought we had a really good plan the first one, but couldn't do it. And that's something that the CSEC could really help with. And we would look to them to help identify and staff and in a volunteer perspective, and just help out and make it happen, because we have a very lean and mean and productive staff, but we can only do so much. So we need, I would definitely need the community to help, and so that's the entity that would make the most sense to channel some of that great support and volunteer help.
I think just public comment, I technically on 3.5.
Okay, well, I'm taking out for public comment. I see no one rise. And do you have anything for Zoom?
No.
Okie dokie, so I'm closing public comment.
Yeah, so 3.6, I thought one topic of discussion could be kind of the role of the CSEC, if it's changed or what they should cover, or maybe clarification about what the subcommittee does relative to the CSEC and how it's going to report back and forth. And then for the joint meeting, I guess the question is, anything that Travis just went over this evening, do you want that or any of those items to be a topic for the joint meeting between the council and the CSEC?
to have to have a second look at things, but Bob, you can certainly comment.
I think it would be good to have an update of those first 4 items that we talked about here tonight to the overall CSEC group and the council. But I would like to think it would be just a kind of an information update and not a full-blown discussion or taking a part of the documents to try to reform them or anything. Because I think that is done much better at a staff and a committee level than a joint meeting. But giving them an update on what's going on and all the good things that have been transpired, I think is the right thing to do.
I got a few suggestions for you, Travis. Maybe put together a brief history of the city's climate trajectory since Climate Action 2020 and how we got to where we are today, and then clearly distinguish between the Climate Action Work Plan, the Sustainability Plan, and the Climate Action Plan, so that that's clear. And then if you feel like that if there's direction from this group here, to have more urgency, or for whatever you felt was the direction from this body tonight, that I know I wanted to bring it and put a little heat on, because I feel like that it is an emergency and it's really important. So that's what I would like to bring, and to see if the city council would like to have an alternate tracks like I suggested, or if they want to discuss how the city's profile on this might change to demonstrate more urgency commensurate with the scope of the problem, like the RCPA said.
Okay. A number of those comments probably are not going to be able to be incorporated because the agenda packet has to be posted in a few days. But yep.
Out to public comment.
Well, thank you so much. I'll take this out to public comment.
Oh,
See-
we have a public that wants to comment. Tom Conlon, go ahead and speak.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Conlon?
Surprised you thought I'd fallen asleep, didn't you? So I share City Manager Toy's concern about the organization of the committees, and Councilmember Felder's sense that this body really should be the focal point of discussions around climate action. I think back to before the Climate Action 2020 report came out, when Carol Giovannato was the city manager, meeting with her and having a discussion about the need to protect the council from much of the detailed discussion that has happened over the last few years in front of the CSEC. We don't want to show up with unfinished business or messy things in front of the city council unless it's unavoidable. We really should have another body that deliberates on this with staff, so that staff can come up with well thought through policies to recommend to the council that the council can then take action on. So I would be in favor of maybe even sunsetting, and I say this hesitantly without David Morell's perspective and maybe Kim Blattner's perspective and Matt Metzler's perspective and David Storer's perspective, but I can imagine perhaps sunsetting the CSEC's climate-related responsibilities and empowering this committee to meet more often and in a more focused manner on climate action. That strikes me as a good development. It would be more analogous to what's happening in the other cities around the county, and it would allow this committee to be more exclusively focused on its relationship with RCPA and the emerging region-wide climate action process that's underway. So, but again, this is something to discuss further with staff independently, as well as before the CSEC and maybe before the whole council before a final decision is made. So those are my thoughts. I hope those are helpful to you all tonight.
Thank you for the suggestion, Tom.
Comments from the
Pardon?
public?
No,
No
I-
other public comments.
No others. Well, I'm closing the public comment section, so I believe we're on to number 4, JCAS members' reports and comments. Yes.
I just have a couple. I neglected to mention before that on the city webpage on the city's partners, that I think that it Transition Sonoma Valley and Sonoma Valley Climate Coalition is not listed on there, and Tom is the core member of TS Transition Sonoma Valley, who worked on the city municipal climate inventory, and so I think it's an oversight that those two organizations and groups aren't listed as city partners on climate stuff. So I think that should be changed. And also, I would like to second that that it would be great if the city could keep Travis and maybe even boost him to 3/4 time, and let him know he's valued and wanted, and make him feel like he's got some wind in his sails. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Bob? None? Well, thank you. Thank you. Ditto, Travis. As I said, your name is bantered about at different places on these different committees on the county. Number 5, staff comments and announcements.
I have none. Or
Mr.
staff has none.
Well, at this point, number 6, it's time to adjourn.
2 hours wasn't bad.
No. I love